Long ago, in a land of rolling hills and dusty roads, a kind man named Joseph and his wife Mary were traveling to a town called Bethlehem. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. They walked slowly, for Mary was tired, but they were filled with a quiet hope because they were about to welcome a very special baby. When they arrived in Bethlehem, there were no rooms left in the houses. Instead, they found a cozy stable filled with the sweet smell of hay. That night, a little baby was born. Mary wrapped him in warm cloths and laid him in a manger, which was a wooden bed for animals. They named the baby Jesus. Far away in the east, wise men noticed something wonderful. A new star had appeared in the night sky. It was larger and brighter than any star they had ever seen. One of the wise men, named Oram, told his friend Jasper that this star was a sign of a new king. They decided to follow it wherever it led. The bright star led the wise men across deserts and mountains until it stopped right over the place where Jesus was. Oram knelt down and offered the child treasures of gold, sweet-smelling frankincense, and myrrh. They were so happy to have found the special child the star had promised. Many years passed, and Jesus grew up to be a wise and kind man. In the wilderness, by the rushing water of the river, lived a man named John. He wore simple clothes and told everyone that God's love was coming to change the world. A man named Barak stood nearby, listening carefully to every word John said. One day, Jesus came to the river and asked John to baptize him in the water. John was surprised because he knew Jesus was very special. "I should be the one asking you," John said. But Jesus smiled and said it was the right way to show everyone how to follow God. As Jesus came out of the water, something amazing happened. The clouds parted, and a beautiful white spirit, looking just like a gentle dove, came down from the sky and rested on him. A peaceful voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, and I am very pleased with him." Jesus began to travel to many towns, teaching people how to be happy and kind. One afternoon, he sat on a grassy hillside to give a big talk. Hundreds of people sat on the grass to listen. He told them, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they bring God's goodness to the earth." Jesus wanted everyone to know that they were important. He said, "You are the light of the world. Don't hide your light under a bowl. Instead, let it shine for everyone to see." He explained that when we do good things, we are like a bright lamp in a dark room. Before the sun went down, Jesus gave the people a very special rule to remember. "Treat others exactly the way you would like them to treat you," he said. This is called the Golden Rule. Two friends, Leah and Zane, heard him and decided to start right then by sharing their bread. Jesus stood on the mountainside, finishing his long sermon. He told the people that those who hear his words and obey them are like a wise man who builds his house on a solid rock. When the rains fall and the winds blow, that house stands firm. But those who ignore his words are like a man who builds on shifting sand. When the storm comes, his house falls with a great crash. When Jesus entered the town of Capernaum, a Roman centurion approached him. The soldier did not ask for help for himself, but for his servant who was suffering greatly. When Jesus offered to go to his house, the centurion humbly said he was not worthy for Jesus to come under his roof. He knew that Jesus only had to speak a word, and his servant would be healed. That evening, Jesus and his disciples sailed across the Sea of Galilee. A sudden, violent storm arose, and waves crashed over the boat. While the disciples panicked, Jesus was fast asleep on a cushion. They woke him, crying out for help. Jesus stood up and rebuked the wind and the crashing waves, saying, "Peace, be still." Suddenly, the water became as smooth as glass. In a crowded house, some men brought their paralyzed friend to Jesus. Because the crowd was so thick, they had lowered him through the roof. Seeing their great faith, Jesus told the man his sins were forgiven. To prove he had the power to forgive, Jesus told the man, "Get up, take your mat, and go home." Immediately the man stood up, healed and whole. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at a tax collector's booth. Tax collectors were often disliked, but Jesus saw Matthew differently. He simply said, "Follow me." Without hesitation, Matthew stood up, left his coins and ledgers behind, and chose to follow Jesus. Matthew's life was changed forever by that one simple invitation. A ruler named Jairus came and knelt before Jesus, pleading for help because his young daughter had died. Jesus followed him to his home. Despite the mourners weeping outside, Jesus went into the room where the girl lay. He took her by the hand and told her to arise. To the wonder of her father, the girl opened her eyes and stood up. Jesus looked at the crowds and felt great compassion for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. He called his 12 disciples together and gave them a special mission. He gave them authority to heal the sick and told them to go and announce that the kingdom of heaven was near. He sent them out to share the light he had brought into the world. While John the Baptist was in prison, he sent his own followers to ask Jesus if he truly was the promised Savior. Jesus didn't just say yes. Instead, he told the messengers to report what they saw. The blind were gaining sight, the lame were walking, and the poor were hearing good news. These miracles were the proof of who he was. Jesus knew that many people felt tired and overwhelmed by the rules and troubles of the world. He turned to the crowd with a beautiful invitation. "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He promised that his yoke was easy and his burden was light, offering peace to anyone who would learn from him. From the mountaintop to the seashore, Jesus showed that he was the Son of God through his powerful words and his healing touch. He called fishermen, tax collectors, and children alike to follow him. Even today, his words remain the solid rock upon which we can build our lives. In the quiet of the synagogue, the air felt heavy with questions. Jesus stood before the people on the Sabbath, the day of rest. A man named Asher was there, his hand withered and still. The leaders watched closely, hoping to catch Jesus breaking a rule. But Jesus looked at Asher with kindness. "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath?" he asked. With a gentle word, he told Asher to stretch out his hand. As Asher obeyed, his hand became strong and whole again, reaching out in wonder. As more people followed Jesus, a leader named Philon stepped forward. He demanded a sign to prove who Jesus was, but Jesus knew that signs were not enough for a heart that was closed. He told them about the prophet Jonah, who was in the belly of the whale for 3 days. Just as Jonah was a sign, Jesus said, the Son of Man will be a sign. He warned Philon that even the people of old would stand as witnesses against those who saw the light but refused to walk in it. One afternoon, the crowds grew so large that Jesus climbed into a small wooden boat. His disciple Matthew sat on the shore, ready to record every word. Jesus began to tell stories called parables. He spoke of a sower casting seeds. Some seeds fell on rocky ground, some among thorns, and some on good soil. Matthew watched as the people listened, wondering if their own hearts were like the soft, fertile earth that allows a tiny seed to grow into a great harvest. Jesus told a story about a merchant named Agathon, who spent his life searching for the finest treasures. One day, Agathon found a single pearl of such great beauty and value that it outshone everything he had ever seen. Without hesitation, he went and sold every single thing he owned, his house, his fine clothes, and his other jewels, just so he could possess that one precious pearl. The kingdom of heaven, Jesus explained, is just like that treasure. Late in the day, in a lonely place, thousands of people were hungry. The disciples were worried because they had no food to give them. Peter approached Jesus, showing him 5 small loaves of barley bread and 2 little fish. Jesus took the humble meal and looked up to heaven, giving thanks to God. He began to break the bread, and as he handed it to Peter, something miraculous happened. The bread and fish did not run out. They kept growing and growing in his hands. The miracle spread through the crowd like a ripple on a pond. Matthew moved among the families, carrying a heavy basket that never seemed to empty. He reached a young boy named Ari who sat on the grass. Ari's eyes went wide as Matthew handed him a large, warm piece of bread and a fish. Everyone ate until they were full. When the meal was over, the disciples gathered 12 baskets of leftovers, proving that God's silver and gold are nothing compared to his abundance. Later that night, a great storm tossed the disciples' boat on the sea. Through the dark mist, they saw a figure walking on the waves. It was Jesus. Peter, filled with a sudden burst of courage, stepped out of the boat and walked on the water toward him. But when Peter saw the strength of the wind, he began to sink. "Lord, save me," he cried. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him, pulling Peter up from the cold, swirling depths. Back on the shore, Philon and the other leaders grumbled because Jesus' disciples did not wash their hands in the traditional way before eating. Jesus turned to them and explained that it is not what goes into the mouth that makes a person unclean, but what comes out of the heart. Evil thoughts, greed, and lies come from within, Jesus told Philon. He taught that true worship is not about following outward rules while the heart remains far from God. Jesus traveled to the region of Tyre and Sidon, where a woman named Adra came to him. She was not from the land of Israel, but she had heard of his power. She knelt in the dust, begging Jesus to heal her suffering daughter. At first, Jesus tested her, but Adra replied with such humility and wit that Jesus smiled. "Woman, great is your faith," he declared. At that very moment, as the sun set behind the hills of Caesarea Philippi, Jesus turned to his friends with a question that felt as heavy as the surrounding stones. "Who do people say I am?" They offered many names, but then Jesus looked directly at them. "But who do you say I am?" Peter did not hesitate. His voice was steady as he declared, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus smiled, telling Peter that this truth was a gift from heaven, a rock upon which something great would be built. 6 days later, Jesus led Peter, James, and John up a high mountain where the world felt quiet and close to the sky. Suddenly, everything changed. Jesus' face began to shine like the sun, and his clothes became as white as light itself. Peter watched in breathless awe as the glory of heaven seemed to pour onto the mountaintop. A bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the heavens spoke, telling them that Jesus was the beloved Son. After they descended the mountain, Peter was approached by men asking about the temple tax. Jesus, knowing Peter's thoughts, told him to go to the sea and cast a hook. "Take the first fish that comes up," Jesus said. When Peter pulled a shimmering fish from the water and opened its mouth, he found a silver coin, the exact amount needed for the tax. It was a small miracle that reminded Peter that the King of Heaven provides for every need, even the smallest ones. The disciples began to argue about who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus didn't point to a soldier or a king. Instead, he called a young boy named Elian to stand beside him. Jesus told his followers that unless they changed and became humble like little Elian, they would never truly understand his kingdom. He taught them that the greatest people are those who do not try to be important, but who care for others with a simple, honest heart. Jesus wanted the disciples to understand how much every single person matters to God. He told them a story about a shepherd who had 100 sheep. When one little lamb wandered away into the dark woods, the shepherd did not stay with the 99 who were safe. He went out into the cold and the shadows, searching until he found the one that was lost. Jesus explained that in the same way, it is never God's will for even one of his children to be lost or forgotten. One morning, parents brought their children to Jesus, hoping he would pray for them. The disciples tried to turn them away, thinking Jesus was too busy for little ones. But Jesus was displeased with this. "Let the little children come to me," he said firmly. He reached out to a young girl named Leora, drawing her close. He placed his hands on her head and blessed her, showing everyone that the kingdom of heaven belongs to those with a heart like Leora's. A wealthy young man named Joram ran up to Jesus, asking what he must do to have eternal life. Joram had followed many rules, but his heart was tied to his many possessions. When Jesus told him to sell what he owned and give to the poor, Joram's face fell. He walked away sad because he couldn't let go of his riches. Jesus sighed, explaining to his friends that it is hard for those who trust in wealth to enter the kingdom, for true treasure is found in following him. To explain God's fairness, Jesus told a story about a vineyard owner. A worker named Caleb started working early in the morning, while others were hired much later in the day. At sunset, the owner gave Caleb and the latecomers the exact same wage. When Caleb complained, the owner reminded him that he had been paid exactly what was promised. Jesus taught that God's grace is a gift he gives freely to everyone, no matter when they decide to follow the way. As they traveled toward Jerusalem, a woman named Salome, the mother of 2 disciples, came to Jesus with a bold request. She knelt and asked if her sons could sit in the highest places of honor next to Jesus. Jesus gently told her that greatness in his kingdom is not about sitting on thrones or being served. He explained that to be truly great, one must be a servant to others, just as he came not to. As Jesus drew near to Jerusalem, he sent 2 disciples to find a donkey and her young colt. He sat upon the colt, and a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down branches from the trees and strewed them in the path. The people cried out, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." When Jesus entered the temple of God, he saw that it had become a place of buying and selling instead of a house of prayer. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. He told them that God's house should be a place of worship for everyone, and he healed the blind and the lame who came to him there. The next morning, as Jesus returned to the city, he saw a fig tree by the road. He went to it, but found nothing on it but leaves. He said to the tree, "Let no fruit grow on you ever again." Immediately, the fig tree withered away. When Peter saw it, he was amazed at how quickly the tree had dried up. Jesus told a story about a landowner who planted a beautiful vineyard and rented it to farmers. When it was time to harvest, the landowner sent his servants to collect his share of the fruit. But the farmers were unkind and took the servants, treating them poorly. Finally, the landowner sent his own son, hoping they would respect him. Then Jesus spoke of a king who prepared a great wedding feast for his son. When the invited guests refused to come, the king told his servants, "Go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding." The servants went out and gathered everyone they could find, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. Some leaders tried to catch Jesus in his words. They showed him a piece of money and asked if it was right to pay taxes. Jesus looked at the coin and asked whose image was on it. When they said Caesar's, Jesus replied, "Render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." A scribe asked Jesus, "Which commandment in the law was the greatest?" Jesus answered him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus warned the people about leaders who only did good things so that others would see them. He said they loved the best seats at feasts and wearing long, fancy robes, but their hearts were not right. He taught that whoever humbles himself will be exalted, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled. As Jesus walked away from the temple, his disciples showed him the massive, beautiful buildings. But Jesus told them that a time was coming when not one stone would be left upon another. Peter and the others were quiet, wondering when these things would happen and what the sign of his coming would be. Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives and told them to watch and be ready. He said that just as a fig tree puts out leaves when summer is near, they would see signs of his return. Heaven and earth will pass away, he promised, but my words will by no means pass away. He told them to be like faithful servants, always waiting for their king. Jesus told a story about a master who gave his servants bags of gold called talents. 2 servants used their talents well to help the master's work grow. But one servant was afraid and hid his gold in the ground. Jesus taught that we should use the gifts God gives us to do good while we wait for the King to return in his glory. While Jesus was at a friend's house in Bethany, a woman came to him with a beautiful jar of very expensive perfume. She poured the sweet-smelling oil over his head. Some people thought it was a waste, but Jesus told them she had done a wonderful thing to prepare him for what was coming. He said her kindness would be remembered forever. On the night of the Passover, Jesus sat with his 12 disciples. He took bread, blessed it, and broke it, saying, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took a cup of wine and gave thanks, telling them it was the promise of a new covenant. He told them he would soon be leaving, but he would not forget them. Later that night, Jesus went to a garden called Gethsemane to pray. He was very sorrowful and asked his friends to stay awake with him, but Peter and the others were so tired that they fell fast asleep. Jesus prayed to God the Father, "Not as I will, but as you will," showing his great love and obedience. Suddenly, a crowd arrived with torches and swords. Judas, one of the disciples, walked up to Jesus and greeted him with a kiss. This was a secret signal to the soldiers to arrest Jesus. Even though his friends were scared and ran away, Jesus stayed calm, knowing this was all part of God's plan to save his people. The soldiers took Jesus to a governor named Pilate. Pilate asked Jesus if he was the king of the Jews. Jesus answered, "It is as you say." Pilate saw that Jesus had done nothing wrong, but the crowd shouted for him to be punished. Pilate washed his hands in a bowl of water to show he didn't want to be blamed for what happened next. Soldiers led Jesus away to a hill called Golgotha. There, they placed him on a wooden cross. Even in his pain, Jesus looked down and saw his mother, Mary, standing nearby. He spoke words of love and comfort to her. The sky turned dark in the middle of the day as the king gave his life for everyone. When evening came, a kind man named Joseph of Arimathea asked for Jesus' body. He wrapped it in clean linen and placed it in a new tomb cut into a large rock. A massive, heavy stone was rolled in front of the entrance, and soldiers were sent to guard it so that the tomb would remain sealed and quiet. Early Sunday morning, there was a great earthquake. An angel with a face like lightning and clothes as white as snow rolled back the stone. When Mary Magdalene came to the tomb, she saw the angel sitting on the stone. "Do not be afraid," the angel said. "He is not here, for he is risen as he said." Jesus appeared to his disciples on a mountain in Galilee. He told them, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth." He commanded them to go and tell everyone the good news. "And remember," Jesus promised with a smile, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age."